Welcome to the Fit 15 podcast show, where you'll find health and fitness inspiration, motivation, and information shared in 15-minute episodes. Tune in while getting a move on to make leading and enjoying the benefits of a healthy lifestyle almost too easy. It's the Fit 15. And now your host, Catherine Basu.
Welcome to the Fit 15 podcast show. I'm your host, Catherine Basu, and this is the first episode of season 2 of the podcast. So I want to welcome those of you who have been longtime listeners back to the show, and those of you who are new, I want to welcome you as well. I'm really excited for today's episode and to have the podcast starting up again after a little break in between season 1 and season 2. For today's episode, I'm going to share with you a great conversation I had with Sarah Pruitt Soufl, a registered dietitian who I'll share more about with you in a moment. But I also wanted to just remind you about the reason why I've created this podcast and a little bit more about how you can get the most out of it and how it can really help you learn some great facts, get inspired, but also enjoy some of the many benefits that fitness can offer you, whether you work with someone at my fitness company, Fit Armadillo, or don't, and just want to enjoy some of the benefits of fitness that you'll learn about on the show. So the whole idea for the show is to have it be a 15-minute or so podcast show where you are encouraged, and I remind you of this in the beginning through that intro, to get up and get moving while you are getting inspired and learning new information from the guests I have on the podcast. So I encourage you to do that today, to get up and get moving. The episode is probably not going to be exactly 15 minutes long. That doesn't always happen, but I know that you are busy, and I really want you to get the benefits that come from moving for even just 15 minutes of walking once a day. And so what I've done with the show is decided to play a little soundbite at the halfway point mark of 15 minutes, which is 7.5 minutes. And that's going to remind you to turn around. If you only have that time for an out and back walk that's 15 minutes long, you'll be able to do that and enjoy the health and general benefits of more creativity, focus, and more energy when you get back to your desk or whatever other task you're working on. And I really am excited to help you do that again in this season. If you subscribe to the show, you will have a reminder, almost like having a personal trainer remind you to get up and get moving during your work week, because we do release an episode of the Fit 15 5 days a week. So I encourage you to subscribe whether you're new here or this is your 101st, I guess, episode that you're listening to, because that's my goal for the show. Is just I wanted there to be a way for me to help my fans and clients and family members get inspired, have that reminder to get moving, even if I wasn't working with them 5 days a week personally. So I hope you'll subscribe so that you can enjoy that reminder, almost like having a personal trainer, that you want to get moving when you see that new episode come through. Hopefully you'll tune in with us and get your inspiration and information of the day. And that's a little bit more about the podcast. So if you have guests you want to hear from or topics you'd like me to cover, you can always send me an email. podcast@fitarmadillo.com is the best way to get in touch. And yeah, I'm just really excited to have you joining me for season 2. So back in season 1, I had this great guest on who is back again today. She's someone who's local to me here in the South Bay. It's Sarah Pruitt Soufl. She was on for episode 29, which was, Is the Keto Diet for You? So if you missed that episode, it was really popular for many reasons, but I think one of which is that the keto diet has been really popular lately. I highly recommend going back and getting a little overview of the keto diet and whether or not you might want to choose to start it or not. But today we're going to be talking about intuitive eating, and I've actually split this episode up into 2 parts. Today we'll talk about the first 5 principles of intuitive eating, and then tomorrow we'll talk about the last 5, the principles 6 through 10 of intuitive eating, and a little bit more about why you might want to start intuitive eating or trying to work on that yourself. So who is Sarah Pruitt, Soufl? She is a non-diet registered dietitian, nutritionist that empowers you through insight and information to appreciate your body, move more, improve lab values, and understand food and nutrition as one important aspect of a full life. She specializes in holistic nutrition aimed at reducing disease risk and promoting wellness for people of all shapes and sizes. Sarah, welcome back to the Fit 15. I'm so excited to have you as my guest today.
Thanks, Catherine. I'm excited to be here too.
So today we are going to chat about intuitive eating. So maybe could you start us out for the people who haven't heard about intuitive eating before, or maybe have some misconceptions about it? What is intuitive eating? What does that mean to eat intuitively?
So eating intuitively is a way to honor yourself by eating using internal hunger and satiety cues, and also honoring your emotional self and your physical well-being. And the term was coined by two authors, two registered dietitians who wrote the book Intuitive Eating, A Revolutionary Program That Works, Evelyn Tripoli and Elise Resch, and they're both here in the LA area and still working. So yeah, the concepts in the book sort of inform how we practice intuitive eating. They definitely do.
Love having that definition and background on intuitive eating. Wonder, Sarah, if you could share with the listeners what you shared with me before we hit record, which is that there are actually 10 principles of intuitive eating and what those are and how we can explore those to maybe start practicing intuitive eating in our own lives.
Yes. So there are 10 principles of intuitive eating, and they are arranged in such an order that you want to follow them kind of one after the other, although there's no rules and it's kind of fluid. And depending on what kind of eater you are now, you might want to dive into them at different points in time. But the number one thing that you must do when you're starting intuitive eating is to, number one, reject the diet mentality.
Hi friends, it's Catherine, and that little sound is what I alluded to in the beginning of the show. It is your halfway point reminder if you're joining us for an out and back walk and only have 15 minutes, you want to turn around now. All right, back to my conversation with Sarah.
So throw out all the books and magazines that are related to diets or are diet books. Stop following Twitter accounts and Instagram feeds and Pinterest feeds that advocate dieting and restriction or limiting food choices, or that make you feel like you're less than. Mm-hmm. So because you have to realize that diets work by offering you this magical fantasy that you can lose weight quickly, easily, permanently, but you have to reject that. So question all of those assumptions that you will have. When you have the perfect body, you'll have all the self-confidence, all the money, all the love, and none of the rejection. So yeah, diets work by making you feel bad about yourself. Mm-hmm. So that you'll make a plan, which is a diet. But we have to stop planning and stop wanting that diet.
Got it. So intuitive eating is not a diet then. That's good news.
Yeah. No, it's not a diet.
Got it.
Yeah. And then that's number one. And number two is honoring your hunger. Mm-hmm. So that's definitely some action you would take on your intuitive eating journey, is to eat when you're hungry. Because chronic dieters will often just restrict, not eat, mm-hmm. either at certain parts of the day or at all. But our food, the truth is that our bodies need food because we need energy. Mm-hmm. And energy comes from food. So we need to have enough carbohydrates, protein, and fat to give us all the energy we need to get through the day. And honoring your hunger is part of developing trust with yourself. So your body trusts that you'll give it food and you trust that you'll feed your body well, because you're not going to ignore your hunger. You're not going to ignore yourself.
Sure. No, that sounds pretty important. And do you have any tips? I mean, this might be in another step, but I find sometimes, myself included, figuring out when I'm hungry, I'm not always good at. Like, I might be working, really intensely on something, and then I realize I've totally missed lunch. And so sometimes I try to schedule having lunch so that I actually, I might not feel 100% hungry, like my stomach's growling, but I know that if I don't eat around that time, I might just zoom through it because I'm in a zone. Like, do you have any insights on how to feel hunger, how to tap into that more?
That's a great example, because it sounds like you're the kind of person that when you get working on something, or when you have a little bit of an anxiety level, like because you're trying to finish something or whatever, you're feeling anxious about something, your hunger cues kind of dissipate, or maybe you get a headache when you're hungry, or maybe you just feel tired when you're hungry. Yeah, it doesn't always come from your stomach. So you're learning your hunger cues. So you'd have a different hunger cue, like a headache or somewhere else in your body. So then in your case, so you found a way to feed yourself when you think you should probably be hungry or would need some food to get you through the afternoon, by setting a timer and scheduling it in. So that's a great way to do it. It's a great way to find your hunger and fullness cues. People who find that they don't really have any hunger or fullness cues at all, you would set a timer for every 3 to 4 hours and eat at those times so that you start to develop those hunger cues.
Okay.
So your body relearns them.
Okay. So that maybe there's something, does that kind of help your metabolism, right? Come back to a normal, point if you've done other things, maybe you've been dieting before.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. You're normalizing your metabolism, and you're normalizing your feeding schedule.
Got it. Okay. Well, that's really helpful.
So number 3 is making peace with food. So just not having that fight anymore, just giving up the war, shaking hands with food, giving yourself unconditional permission to eat. Unconditional permission to eat. So we're not canting or shouldn'ting our food, like, oh, I shouldn't eat that, or I can't have that, because that leads to feelings of deprivation. Like, oh, I shouldn't have that. Oh, and then you feel deprived, and then could lead to binging or overindulging, or however you want to put it, eating more than you would really want to. Like, you really, really might not want to eat that much, but since you've told yourself you can't have it, then you're having so much of it that you're feeling bloated or too uncomfortably full.
Right. Someone recently was telling me that, inside we're all kind of rebellious teenagers, and that really stuck with me, that, with that analogy with how we relate to food or anything, right? Like, if we're going to tell ourselves we can't have it, then when we finally do, we might rebel and have way more than we wanted to.
Yes. I'll show you I can have that food. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So just having unconditional permission to eat anything, and then, noticing how you feel afterwards, can give you some feedback about whether you like that food or don't like that food, or, because if you have it in your head that, oh, that's the most delicious thing, but I can't have it, and then you have it all the time, you might realize, oh, it's not as good as I thought it was.
Right.
And then it takes the power away from the food. It's like food is neutral. So we want to come to neutral when it comes to judging foods. No foods are good or bad or better than another food. Which leads us to the 4th principle, challenge the food police. So the food police are any of those thoughts or judgments that go on in your head, in the dieting mind, or in our culture, that say, this is a good food and this is a bad food, or this is nutritious and this is junk. They really just monitor all those unreasonable rules of dieting, or saying you can have this much, but not more than that. So when you hear those voices and they're replaying in your head or from our culture, whatever, you can just question them. Really? Is that really true? Okay. I'm giving myself permission to eat this unconditionally. Speaking back to those voices and challenging them is really important.
I love that. Very cool. And then what's number 5?
Number 5 is feeling your fullness. And that's another thing you might learn by setting yourself on a schedule. If you haven't really felt hunger, you can also feel your fullness. So you would look for the sensations in your body and feel the sensations of fullness. So people can do this by stopping in the middle of a meal to assess, like, how am I feeling now? How full am I on a scale from 1 to 10?
Mm-hmm.
How full am I halfway through? How full was I feeling at the beginning of this meal? And how full do I feel now? And then at the end of the meal, or whenever you decide that you're done, how full am I now? You might ask, how does the food taste? You might notice that the food tastes differently when you first eating it to when you're feeling fuller. Because there's that law of diminishing returns where it might not feel as good at the end or taste as good at the end because you're feeling fuller.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And then since you've given yourself unconditional permission to eat, just know that you can always eat again if you're still hungry. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Even if it's within 30 minutes or 45 minutes of eating, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
If you're feeling hungry again, you can always eat more. Yeah.
Hi, friends. It's Catherine. And because I did that little intro for today's episode, and there are so many principles of intuitive eating, and I kept interrupting Sarah, we have broken up today's episode into 2. So those are your first 5 principles of intuitive eating. I invite you to subscribe to the show so you don't forget to come back to find out what the last 5 principles of intuitive eating are when I continue my conversation with Sarah tomorrow. In the meantime, I invite you to go over to the website for the podcast. The webpage is fitarmadillo.com/podcast, and check out the show notes from today's episode so you can find and follow Sarah on social media, check out her website for more resources and tips, and to see if perhaps she has a in-person event on intuitive eating coming up. She did host a few events last month in August, and if you're local to the South Bay, I encourage you to keep following her to be able to enjoy some of those in the future. Thanks so much for listening, and if you subscribe, I will chat with you tomorrow when Sarah comes back and we talk about the last 5 principles of intuitive eating. Chat with you then. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Fit 15. For show notes and more, visit fitarmadillo.com/podcast. See you next time.